Tristana really risen in terms of power, along with Kalista. Two of the strongest AD carries will already be taken off the table. Caitlyn really fallen off here in Europe after the nerfs that she did receive in 7.16, and it increases the viability of champions like Xayah. And over in North America, we've been seeing a lot of Twitch as well.
Well, we saw a fair bit of Twitch coming out of Reckless, and that might just be the choice they want to pick up. But for Hans Sama playing that 3 games of Tristana, he'll have to try something a little bit different this time around. The Orianna's banned away by Fnatic, and it's back over to Misfits for the final.
So Jarvan being taken off the board well from Soaz. I'm expecting something like a very early focus on a champion like the Gragas. Very safe, very well-rounded. Broxah demonstrated very high potency on it in the jungle. I think it would be a very safe blind pick right now for Fnatic.
Yeah, looks like that's going to be what they lock in. Of course, the Elise had already been banned away last. That was where Broxah has found a lot of early game success, his most played champion. Instead, he falls down to Gragas, which he has a handful of games on, and shouldn't be any stranger to this champion.
Now I'm expecting an early focus on the Xayah here from Misfits. The thing about Hans Sama is there have been a lot of question marks around his champion pool as an AD carry. He doesn't seem to have the best of success on low mobility AD carries because he needs to have that ability to self-peel. So by getting that Xayah in his corner means that he has that self-defensive ultimate, and you compare it up with a lot of strong meta supports like the Thresh that's still available, like the Alistar that's still up, that would complement Ignar's playmaking style.
Yes, it would. Now, with 10 seconds left to go, still contemplating what they will take second since the Gnar got locked in first. If that AD carry comes through, remove a chance for Fnatic to try and dig deeper away at his pool, and it will be the Xayah locked in.
So now the AD carry locked in for the side of Misfits. I'm fascinated by, very quick answer there from Fnatic. And of course, the Cassiopeia, considered S tier by many of the pros here in Europe. She doesn't really have any bad matchups. She takes a little while to scale, but she does so well in terms of early trading. She does really well in late game team fights. But the biggest weakness she has is her early mobility because you can't build boots. It means that her roaming power is not quite as strong as some of the mid laners, and her wave clear isn't the strongest. But aside from that, there's nothing really that she struggles with. And Orianna taken off the board, Misfits are kind of forced into taking another powerful mid laner in the form of Syndra, who will be able to hold her own against the Cassia.
Yeah, it's a Power of Evil special, of course, so is the Orianna, but that mid lane matchup looks like Misfits will just try to hold on for a little while. And now we enter the ban phase 2. Let me see where they want to hit at. No AD carry locked on the Fnatic side, so maybe Misfits want to try and dig deep at Reckless champion pool.
And I'm wondering now as well what supports we're going to have, because more recently we've been seeing support saved for the second draft because there are so many counter picks, there are so many options you have, Pyra, in the sense that you can, if you pick something like an Alistar, then you can go for an uncensored support because you can't get punished for it.
Right.
But then if you go for an uncensored support, then you have the option of going against someone like a Thresh who can catch those kind of out. So there's so many counterplays, and people want to try and save their support for as long as possible to guarantee you that strong 2v2 down in the bottom lane. And remember what we were talking about in terms of Misfits trying to be able to get a strong lane. It's very important for them to try and get that advantage. In the top lane, they've been able to get it for the Gnar. In the mid, it's kind of even. And now that they've gotten themselves the Xayah, they can really take away a lot of the remaining powerful AD carries. And if they could just round things out with a strong support, then they have, at the very least, 2 winning lanes that can go in their favor.
And that's exactly what Misfits will need if they want to contend up against Fnatic. Now, Sivir is banned away. Fnatic will have another chance to ban right before we get into our last pick phase. Sejuani was what they elected to remove first off.
Now, Maokai is still available for Misfits. He acts as not the strongest form of engage, but he's really good in terms of follow-up, especially when you pair that up with the Righteous Glory. And if Misfits got themselves a Thresh or an Alistar, they'd have a few good ways to actually kick off a lot of those fights. So I think right now for Misfits, they could go for a Maokai. I think it would be pretty safe. Alternatively, they could go Super Ham, and they could go for something like, I say Super Ham, they could also go for a Zac. Zac's still very safe. We saw that work out for Max Law in their series versus the Unicorns of Love when the Poppy was taken off the board.
It looks like as the seconds tick down, they'll do it again. So Zac is locked in. I mean, you say Ham, and I think
I was thinking more the Kayn. The Kayn was what I was thinking of in terms
that's
of
true.
Ham.
But I mean, the Zac can definitely go all in, that's for sure. All right, so for Fnatic's side, contemplating on the Ashe, that would be a great way for them to start setting up fights, and it's something that Reckless has definitely taken to. 10 seconds still.
And then they're only really missing their support. So now Fnatic have to make a decision. Do they want a little bit more engaged? Do they want self-peel? Do they want to put a little bit more focus on Reckless with non-incentive support? What are they going to run the risk of to allow Misfits to get that counter pick in the support role?
Well, we saw Fnatic play a couple of interesting supports this split. And there is another one. The Morgana is the one that comes in this time. That's a lot of AP.
You're quite right. There is a huge amount of AP on the side of Fnatic, but they've also got a lot of self-peel. It's going to be very difficult for champions like the Zac to really stick onto an Ashe when you've got the silences, the knockback, the miasma from the Cassio, the self-peel that Ashe has on herself with all the slows, the Black Shield added too. I think it works very nicely against champions like the Zac, but this now gives Misfits the freedom to go for an uncensored support themselves. This will give Fnatic a slightly favorable matchup in the 2v2 down the bottom lane, which means that during the early game, I very much expect Misfits to invest heavily into Alphari. I want to see Maxwell trying to get Alphari ahead on the Gnar. Very good into a lot of tank matchups, can apply a lot of pressure and be a big split push threat later on. But truly, the team fighting is where we're going to look later on into the game. Both sides have great scaling, great team fight comps, with Fnatic having the ever so slight edge in the full 5v5.
It comes down to it in the all even. Of course, Fnatic's still going to be the favorites. We've seen what happens when you can shut down a Cho'Gath. That might be the chance for Misfits to try and win on the lane as predicted. We'll find out how it all unfolds, but the first draft phase is done for now. The coaches, just going to be left for them to give a few last words of advice to their players before shaking hands, walking off stage, and then they'll have to watch it from the backstage. But it's all on the line here. Fnatic and Misfits. Big reasons for both these teams to try and make it to the finals in Paris. Fnatic trying to reclaim the European throne, and Misfits Gaming trying to fulfill the promise of the one-year plan. If they can make a finals, if they can beat the team that swept them in spring, that is a big statement heading all the way there. They're going to be looking at Fnatic like the final raid boss.
You're quite right, Pyra. The last time these two met, it was a 3-0 for Fnatic. The stage got to them a little bit. They felt like they could not perform to the level that they wanted. But now they're looking to redeem themselves as they go up against Fnatic in our first semi-final.
As the dust will settle, we are on to Summoner's Rift for game number 1 of the semi-finals here in Europe. And let's see how it all unfolds. Fnatic, a perennial crowd favorite here. Now, let's see how this opening is happening. A lot of Fnatic members charging down the mid lane to start things off. No line of scrimmage for this team.
They're trying to go for a bit of a cheeky level 1 play. Notice how Caps moved up into the mid lane, see if he could spot out Power of Evil. He saw that he wasn't there, so now they're trying to play around the lack of vision from Misfits, but the tower did spot them out. Misfits now know exactly what Fnatic are trying to do. Plan will be aborted from Fnatic. So they're just going to disengage and return to an essence of the line of skirmish, but you can still see Reckless and Jez is hanging around. Very paranoid there from Jez. He's just throwing out those dark bindings in case Misfits trying to do something sneaky of their own.
Nothing lost but a bit of mana. But let's talk about that mid lane, because the Cassiopeia matchup was something that Fnatic picked very deliberately, very early on, and they banned away a lot from Power of Evil.
And it's interesting because, as we mentioned, Cassio doesn't really have any bad matchups. When they actually trade in the 1v1, Cassio is always going to win against the Syndra. But the thing about Syndra is early on, she naturally has a lot more wave clear. It becomes difficult to exert that kind of wave clear down onto a Cassio, usually because the Cassio will just move up, and every time you try to push, she's going to be like, I'm going to twin fang you in the face, which is naturally very obnoxious. What Syndra does have very nicely is a good setup for ganks, because her stun is very difficult to react to, and because Cassio in the early levels cannot buy boots, which means that she's pretty low in terms of mobility, you're asking for this Zac to come into the lane very early on and try and put this Cassio behind. So that's what we're expecting from the Power of Evil and Max Lord duo. If they want to try and shut down Caps, they have great options to be able to do it.
Yeah, Max Lord, we definitely are going to be looking to make some early plays, but maybe not just in this mid. You mentioned the pick and ban, that up top is another viable option, and after he clears, look at how pushed in Alphari is right now on this Gnar. Obviously, it's a level differential, but it's a prime opportunity to try and get this Cho'Gath down early on.
In terms of wave clear, Cho'Gath has a bit of an advantage very early on. However, once a few levels are gained for Alphari, he's got a few more of his abilities, the level 3 mark especially. That's where he can look to be much more aggressive in terms of trading up against Soaz. But now that Soaz has been able to get the early push, he's moved down into the enemy jungle to see if he can get vision on Maxwell as he's clearing his red buff. And now Broxah has come. He wants to try and interfere with the early ganking.
Uh-oh. Maxlor, he's only on half his health bar. Broxah waits and lets the Krugs do the dirty work as he body slams over. Gets a hit. That's double buff battle right now with Krugs in the mix, but Maxlor is not going to get the best of this one. Empowered auto attack, and he's forced back under the tower. Fnatic with the early stop play.
Now, Zach, he received some nerfs recently that really affected his early clear speed. And because of the damage that he lost on his W, it meant that he took a lot more damage in the jungle itself because he had to spam the ability more often, and it took him longer to clear those camps, so he naturally took more damage from the jungle creeps themselves. This means that during early levels, he gets very low compared to a Gragas, who doesn't really take any damage at all, and Broxah, utilizing the pushing top and mid, gave him the freedom to go for the invade and force Maxlor back to base.
Man, and you know Fnatic have done their homework on this one. They knew exactly when and where they could go as Rekkles getting fired down here by Hansam and Ignar, but they've got to be careful. That soil is tormenting their health bars for sure. Rekkles forced to use flash in that exchange right now.
The heal, sorry.
Or the heal, I mean. Yeah. Excuse me, other summoner.
Yeah.
I'm used to it being on F. I'm just going to throw that out there as an excuse.
That's fair enough. I like this training from Hansam, trying to exert a bit more pressure. One of the players that really did step up in Game 1 versus the Unicorns of Love in their quarterfinals. Hansam and Ignar were the two that really got that early lead and ran away with it. He also got himself his pentakill in that very first game too. So he has a great performance, and he's trying to replicate that here as Caps continues to apply pressure in the middle lane.
Yeah, I mean, this is going to be hard for Maxlor. He was a large part of that success as well, and now Power of Evil a little bit low is going to try and bait in. Maxlor comes through, Stretching Strike doesn't land. The Snake is slipping away, and that's the end of that. Maxlor down a level compared to Broxah, and this was all the Fnatic game plan to keep the jungler down so he couldn't start to snowball the lanes, where Misfits found success against the Unicorns.
You're quite right, Pyra. Trying to get Maxlor to invest in these lanes is really where Misfits get a lot of their advantages on. You heard DeFisher talking about it earlier on in the day. He's going to be a key part of the success of Misfits if they want to be able to take down Fnatic. And so far, he has been prevented from doing that thanks to the early pressure from Broxah. And the Misfits laners are struggling a little bit. You can already see advantages being gained in mid and in bot, which is a great start for Fnatic. Their composition, it scales very well. Later on into the game, it is going to be very strong, especially in those 5v5 team fights. And that doesn't mean that Misfits will be weaker, but it's going to be just slightly behind if both teams were able to just fight 5v5 in that instant.
Right, you're giving Fnatic, though, a little bit of an edge, even if things were all even. We wanted to see Misfits be able to step it up individually in a lot of ways, and you can already see the difference in how things are starting off. 36 jungle CS to the 10 that Maxlor's gotten. It's all he can do to just get a ward out on Broxah. But this is a guy who had such an incredible performance against the Unicorns. He was such a key part, and clearly Fnatic were watching that.
Yeah, you can see the difference here between the regular season and the quarterfinal performance of Maxlor. The KDA, pretty significant for Maxlor in his quarterfinal. Obviously, over a lot more games, it's going to affect your KDA a little more. But the key thing to note here is the jungle proximity, where he was investing a lot more time into his laners, getting them ahead, and the goal difference, as we see a bit of a gank up in the top lane.
Yeah, Alfari, half his health now. He's got no Gnar bar to speak of, but Broxah freed up to try and put a little more pressure on the lanes, especially up there where Alfari could be getting ahead. Broxah will wrap around into this brush, and unfortunately for Maxlor, who's sitting around here, it may be level 5 versus level 5. No ultimate's coming into play, but I don't know if he's going to want to take this fight. There they go. And Broxah doesn't either.
So keep track of the vision as well coming out from Misfits. You can see that around the entrances to the top side, some red wards have been invested to try and see where Broxah is trying to look to gank. And the core thing here is not for Broxah to get a bunch of ganks off. It's mainly just to support and apply pressure and make Maxlor's life very difficult in the early game, which so far he's done a fantastic job of. But thanks to this vision, it's now easier for Maxlor to play around that. He can see where Broxah is invading, and then he can find his own answers of coming back, as now Fnatic try to set up a 3-man gank here onto Power of Evil in the mid.
All that vision, allowing Misfits to stabilize a little bit here. I mean, they're definitely down in the gold game, but it's not a huge deal. They haven't given up first blood. They haven't conceded a tower, so it only amounts to about 500. Jez is now coming down, will be spotted by the ward as he returns to the lane, and Misfits can hold on perfectly well for the time being. Obviously, they had such an incredible performance against the Unicorns, but it's always worth noting, this is a different caliber of team, but can they stay alive? The answer is no. Caps got scattered to the winds. First blood picked up by Power of Evil.
Pyro, do you remember what we were talking about earlier on? The gank setup from a Syndra is so strong. You land the stun. It's very easy for the Zac to follow up because of his very long range from the E. And you just want to try and apply as much pressure as you can. Yes, Maxwell fell behind in the early game, but he's now making up for it. He gets that level 6. He gets first blood for his team. And Misfits, they're off to a good start.
Able to slingshot his way in, though. Reckless has his heal back up, and him and Jez's might just need it, but Brox is showing face down in the bottom, looking for that lane gank. Hansama, Ignar, unafraid to go toe-to-toe with them, staying pretty even in that CS. Now, Reckless has his BF sword, of course, off his first back compared to the Caulfield's Warhammer. And Hansama more apt to build on this Xayah. Have to be a little careful. Dark Binding nearly connects. He's dodged out of it. Brox a flash forward. That's Jez's with the shackles. He's going to force a flash as the exhaust came out. Hansama able to escape. A lot of summoners burnt on the bottom side.
One flash for 2. But I'm keeping my eyes on the mid lane now. Stunned up again for Caps, but they're just going to walk away. No real threat. Power of Evil knows that jungler is bot side. He can afford to play more forward if he so chooses to, but instead decides to back off. But Fnatic, they tried to make something happen in the bottom lane. Reckless, he did not use his Ash Arrow because he knew that Hansama also had his ultimate available as well. So getting the double flashes out was perfectly fine from the side of Fnatic. They gained an advantage. Now we just need to see them make a return gank in the bottom lane. Meanwhile, the top's starting to go back in the favor of Alphari, and I'd love to see now a push up in the middle lane, a little bit more vision control out the side of Misfits towards the river, and then setting up a dive down onto Soaz with both these TPs unavailable for the top lane.
Yeah, the early games tottered from one end to the other. Fnatic first having that lead, but Misfits, of course, gaining it right back, courtesy of the first blood. And now that they have pressure on multiple lanes here, to see if it keeps up as Alphari, he's on half his health, but he's about to go Mega Gnar as Brox looks to come in. Throws the bricks. Soaz chasing forward. There's the Gnar ultimate, but he's caught out. There's nowhere for him to go here. He gets a crunch off, but Brox and Soaz right on his tail. Has to burn his flash to get away. Barrel is going to be dodged, but he can't get outside the rupture, and just under tower range, Broxa fires him down.
But now Maxwell and Power of Evil are making their way up. No flash on Soaz.
Stretching strike. Gonna get stuck on one. Power of Evil looking to unleash the power onto Soaz. A few more auto attacks and a Dark Sphere will be the equalizing kill.
So they ended up trading 1 for 1, but Caps has pushed up mid and he's now making his way down bot. You can see the danger pings coming out from Misfits. They realize that something is amiss here, and I feel like the action is not over yet as Maxtor and Broxa trade hands.
These junglers definitely seem to be gunning for each other all this game so far. We're 10 minutes in and they just keep going at it. Maxtor trying to hold on to this minion wave so that Alphari isn't going to be set too far behind when he makes his way back. Has to give up the ghost on that one.
So Misfits, they're able to get a return kill. Good movement from Power of Evil and Maxtor to try and answer, but this was just slight overstep from Alphari. He saw Broxa coming, he knew he was in danger. Fnatic were fully aware of where the enemy jungler was, and Alphari was not respecting that. So he's forced to use his flash. Cho'Gath doesn't have his ulti, so he can't get the execute. Instead, he has to use his flash to make sure that the chase comes through, but then so much time was spent getting that kill down onto Alphari, allowed Maxtor and Power of Evil to make their way up. So even though Alphari fell behind, he still holds on to a CS lead. Power of Evil gets another kill, and this means that even though the top lane will fall behind, well, they won't even fall behind that much because Soaz ended up losing his life as well. A big advantage was once again gained for Power of Evil, which is very important in this mid lane matchup.
Yeah, gives him his Morellonomicon now on 2 kills. Now it looks like we're back to the mid lane for more action. Maxlor readying up for the big jump. Onto the snake he goes, pulling it back, power unleashed. There is nowhere to go but bouncing, and that is the 3rd kill for PoE.
The camp continues from Misfits. Stun lands, E comes in, he gets drawn back, and it is a one-shot going in the favor of Misfits once more. They are playing once again to their win conditions, and this is the narrative that we set up, Pyre. This is what we wanted to see from Misfits. They play towards a strong lane and they try and get it ahead. Maxlor doing exactly what he did against the Unicorns of Love, but the key difference is that Fnatic are a team that know how to play from behind. We saw it against G2. We've seen it multiple times throughout the regular season. If they are at a deficit, they are a smart team that is very good when it comes into the late game, and they will find avenues back into the game by punishing the very small mistakes of their opposition.
This is why it's all the more important for Misfits to build a large lead, an insurmountable lead, but it's far from that with only 1,500 going for them. Still, good plays by Misfits early on, and they're playing with some confidence. After sweeping the Unicorns of Love, you kind of have to, but it is always worth remembering that Fnatic are a different sort of beast than the Pink Power opponents.
I very much agree with you, Pyra. Fnatic, they have an all-star quality team. 3 of the 5 members of the All-Pro team was made up of Fnatic players, and the other 2 made it into the other 2 top teams. You can make the argument that every single one of their players are top 3 in their region, but it doesn't matter if it's 2v1, as Power of Evil looks for another gank
this time,
Maxthor.
Caps has to know that he's going to get camped for the duration of this game, and even though that Cassiopeia will be able to scale up very effectively for the time being, this is PoE's lane, and he is making Caps dance to his beat.
Now remember, even in the 1v1, Power of Evil, he's not entirely confident that he would be able to win it, but definitely much more favorable. You can even see Caps going for very early magic resistance. Wouldn't be surprised if he went for the Abyssal Mask, which we do often see from Cassiopeias.
Meanwhile, in the other lanes, things continue to trade back and forth. Fairly even, of course. 130 to 129 now matched between the AD carries. Up in the top, of course, Soaz and Alphari. Still fairly even there as well, but Alphari, he's got his Black Cleaver completed.
Want to give this a second to just explain. Opposition towers means the number of towers that you give away when you're playing the game. You can see during the regular season, Misfits very often gave away more towers than they were able to get, whereas in playoffs, very rarely did they give up towers at the 15-minute mark. So Misfits demonstrating again a lot of growth in terms of their objective control and early gameplay.
Maxthor, he's moved his attention down towards the bottom side, but he sees as Broxa is there. He doesn't want to necessarily take the fight once they've already burned abilities, so he goes bouncing out.
A little surprised that Maxthor would try and make a gank happen in the bottom lane. Feel like he could just keep returning to mid. They have good vision set up, but it feels like Power of Evil is saying, you know what? I'm fine. I'm good, man. I can hold my own against his Cassio.
Yeah, his work here is done at this point, so unfortunately for Fnatic's mid lane, they're going to have to hold on for a while until that's going to become a little bit more relevant in terms of damage. And I like this versatility, this change up out of Misfits, because in the last series against the Unicorns, we saw them going for the top side. We saw them snowballing on the bottom side in different games. The mid lane, we thought would just be a holding lane for Power of Evil, but this is where they're putting their focus.
We have to remember that one of the big things that Misfits did demonstrate in their series was the Unicorns, that they can carry out of any lane, or at least they could versus the Unicorns. Because in game 2, where they had the Lucian mid and they had the Poppy against the Cassin, Maxthor just camped. He just kept going mid, tried to snowball Power of Evil, who very quickly ran away with the game once he had the lead that Maxthor was able to help him build. And Power of Evil, he's looking to do the same, but now we need to see him spread that lead across to the rest of the map. Push up mid, move with Maxthor, get vision across the river, and start setting up plays elsewhere. Maybe up in the top lane, maybe get an early Rift Herald, maybe get an early tower bot. But Fnatic, they realized what could happen, and now they're sending up their duo to the top side of the map.
Yeah, that Narbar's run out, and Alphari goes back down to mini. Power of Evil was already cruising up towards the top to try and make the play. But instead, looks like Fnatic, they're going to be the ones shoving their weight around. But while they're away on the bottom, the tower race will commence with Misfits crashing into it first. But they've only got a handful of minions here to work with, so it looks like Fnatic should win this trade.
Misfits, they read the play well. They recognized what was going on, so they just started to push. Now Power of Evil, he actually has a lot of control, forcing Caps away from the tower. But as you rightly said, Fnatic, they were the ones to initiate it. They got to the tower first. They will be able to get that first blood tower a little ahead of the game. But they actually have 3 members salt versus the 2 down bottom, which means that they have a slight tempo advantage, which they're going to use to try and push onto this tier 2.
It looks like we're in for the double trade, so it's just Meganar to try and push them back. But so as Jez is reckless, they are not showing any signs of stopping. And Fnatic, when they make the decision to go and to keep moving, nothing can really stop them here, and they even look to push onto the inhibitors right now, as only now do we see Ignar backing away. Fnatic have decided they want to try and speed this game up. They don't want to wait for the late game if they have to, and the Ash Arrow comes in, tanked up by Maxthor, but here comes PoE, gets the cleanse off, looking for Soaz. There is his ultimate still up and available. If he can find a target to use it on, Maxthor tries to bring 2 members of Fnatic together. But they don't want any of that, and they disengage.
And this is what we mean by Fnatic are much better than the Unicorns at playing from behind. They see these small windows, which they so very rapidly take advantage of. They knew full well, we can push onto this tier 2, we'll be able to get it first. They are not answering, let us just go. Let us go towards that tier 3 and force Misfits out of their comfort zone and to start spreading up across the map. Really good awareness from Fnatic. They are still at a goal deficit. Misfits were still able to get that tier 2 tower, but this was just a great example of what Fnatic do when they are behind.
And this is what's going to help them in the later stages of this game. You talked about the win condition. Both teams have these scaling team fight compositions, but Fnatic are just a little bit better at it. We have to give them a little bit of an edge, not from the composition standpoint, but because pound for pound, these players are just individually a little bit better. So Misfits need to build a bigger lead.
Well, from a composition standpoint as well, that late game definitely will go very heavily in their favor, but they've got to get to that point because Misfits, what they have said is, look, you're not even on the tier 1 in the bottom lane yet. We know you're doing Dragon, so we're going to take 2 of your tier 2s in the top lane. We're also going to take the Rift Herald. We're going to be very happy with this trade because now we can just move on over to the mid. We can push down that tower. We're not afraid of your Cassio. And this is Misfits with a 3,000 gold lead. Game 1, just coming up to the 20-minute mark.
And they don't even need to pop the Rift Herald to fire down that tower in the mid. So 5 towers to the 3. The gold in their pockets are going to go a long way towards getting them quite a shopping spree. We'll take a look as all the items start to finish out, but for the time being in the mid, PoE, he added a needlessly large rod. He throws in the blasting wand as well, and they're well on their way to a lot of damage.
Do you know what those are the components are for?
Why don't you tell me, Vedius?
Well, that's a death cap. He's going for a death cap second on Syndra.
That's confident.
Wow. The thing is, a lot of mid laners actually believe that it's not that efficient. Because the thing about Death Cap is it gains more value the more AP that you have. So it's better as like a 3rd, maybe even a 4th item. But by going for it second in terms of raw damage, you get a lot. And it's much better than things like a Ludens or the Leandries in terms of flat damage. But it's just so expensive that often it's not worth getting. The difference here is that Power of Evil knows that he's really far ahead. He's gotten 3 kills on himself and he thinks he can afford to take that risk. I think it's a big gamble not going for something like a Banshee's Veil as a second item, but he thinks that he can do it. He's going to go for that extra bit of damage, and we'll track how it works for him, because personally, when I go for those greedy builds, it usually ends up backfiring in my face.
Well, I'm just glad he's not building a Nash's Tooth, man. Let's just be honest here.
Good one.
For PoE, though, like, he's never been afraid to take those risks to try and keep this dominance train rolling, and, you know, it may be risky, but sometimes those include a big payoff. Gold lead. Still solidly in the favor of Misfits, as well as the kills and towers, just all those metrics. And with nothing on the map to really fight for at the moment, the Baron has just spawned, but it's still very early to try and contest. They're going to go back after safely gathering some vision, keeping some eyes on what Fnatic have, and actually, yeah, we decided to go for the Void Staff.
I prefer this much more. I think it makes way more sense with the amount of early magic resistance that Fnatic have built up for themselves. He can transition that large rod into a Luden's Echo if he wants for a bit of extra movement speed, or he can save it for a death cap later on. It's just going to give him a nice chunk of AP. But we've got to move away, because we've been talking a lot about Misfits in this early game. We've been talking a lot about how well they've been able to hold off Fnatic in terms of their early power. And let's take this opportunity to talk a little bit about Rekkles.
Yeah, Rekkles is one of the more experienced players, not just in this series, but across the European LCS. And he's had so many postseason games. This will be his 51st, by the way. These are all the statistics from prior to the start of this game. And he's a player that has had a lot of time on the big stage, several levels of big stage, and it brings to bear a lot of the experience that Fnatic has over this younger Misfits squad.
I think it's very impressive that he's 5th in terms of number of playoff games played, yet he's 1st in the number of kills. That just goes to show how long this guy has been playing at the top of his game, but we heard it from himself that this year he feels like he is returning to form, as we see a flash come out from Soaz in the bot lane.
It's like Fnatic are trying to return to some aggression here as Soaz, whew, he had Yordle on the menu there, and meanwhile Caps trying to push away on the Rift Herald in mid. Fnatic, looks like they caught Misfits out for a moment.
We were just talking about Fnatic. We were talking about Rekkles and his experience. And one of the things that Rekkles has done that has made Fnatic so unique this year specifically is the side lane Rekkles strat. The sneaky plays where he will randomly appear in a lane with Soaz and they'll get a kill onto the enemy top laner. He did a lot with Kennen, he did a lot with Twitch, and with those champions it made sense. They had a lot of mobility, they had a lot of secret abilities that would just catch you by surprise. But now he's doing it on an Ashe. And he feels that even though he's playing more meta, he can still stick to his unique style.
All he needed to do was fire that arrow down and allow Soaz just enough time to stick on him for the damage and finish off Alphari. So that will certainly help out the A-Link Cho'Gath a little bit. We're going to take a look at how it unfolded again.
So Alphari, he's just pushing away. He sees Rekkles in lane. He's thinking, oh, this is good. The enemy AD carry has no TV. Then out of nowhere, a wild Cho'Gath appears, and he's like, right, this is a lot of utility that I can't really get away from. It's going to cost me my flash in exchange for Soaz, and it's going to end up losing him his life. But in terms of overall gains, nothing really going in the favor of Fnatic aside from a quick kill and a bit of alleviation from pressure from the Misfits side.
Yeah. Not to mention a stack on Soaz, though. We've seen some Chos get pretty big. And really
literally
a lot of
and
damage.
figuratively.
Yes, in many, many ways. But it does help Fnatic out a little bit in terms of where they're going to be able to throw their weight around on this map. They get a few more wards inside of the Misfits jungle. Still have yet to finish off the mid tower. The Misfits just try and push them back. And historically, they haven't had the best of luck. All those wins you see from Misfits have not been recent against Fnatic.
You have to remember that Misfits, this is their first year in the LCS. Their goal is to make it to Worlds, and the fact that they've been able to make it to 2 semifinals back-to-back is still a big achievement for this organization in their first year of competitive play. There are a lot of young players on the squad in the forms of Hansama, Alphari, Ignar as well, and then you had the more experienced players originally of Kakao and Power of Evil, and now with a little bit less experience, but still someone with experience formerly playing of Giants, you have Maxlore too. So you have this nice amalgamation, and you have this different clash of styles of players in terms of how long they played for, but it's that consistency, always being able to make it to the semifinals, that impresses me the most about this team.
Yeah, and you talk about experience too. We were talking a lot on Rekkles' post-season experience, the same for Soaz and some of these other players now that have had a little more time on Fnatic. But Maxlore also, hadn't had a lot of playoff experience prior, playing with teams like Giants and a short stint on Rocket, of course. He didn't really get a chance to kind of shine in the postseason. We saw that really come to bear against Unicorns of Love, who they also fell to in the spring. It was nice to see Misfits Gaming really stepping things up. I mean, these guys are the big underdogs. Like, make no mistake, the fact that this game is even in their favor is still a big deal. Will it be enough? We have yet to see. But Misfits have shown that in this postseason they can come play with the big boys, but they're going to have to step it up here as Fnatic have started off the Baron. It's down to half its health. Rekkles fires the arrow. Teleport coming in for Alphari. Is this enough time? No chance to try and counter smite. Alphari, though, looks to try and close this gap to shut them out. Maxlore, he goes and jumping in, looks for Soaz now, but he's gonna fall first. No, he goes little blobs. It's Power of Evil that comes up with the first kill of the fight, but all the disengaged tools are coming to bear. Cap's left out on his own, and Alphari claims one. Fnatic trying to eke away with 3 Baron buffs, and they'll get it. But not just yet.
Fnatic, they still walk away with the Baron. They're the ones that get the big gain. The goal difference may still be in the favor of Misfits, but the fact that Fnatic were able to find this is going to slow Misfits down so much. And this is what we talked about with Fnatic. They are so good at finding these small windows, being able to punish the small mistakes. And Misfits, they slowed down their mid-game playmaking, and that meant that Fnatic, with the Cho'Gath, with the Cassio, knew they could rush down this Baron before Misfits could answer. Now the problem is trying to get out of the fight, because Soaz, he doesn't have his ultimate available. Caps had to use his ulti pretty early on and it didn't do very much. Maxlore's happy to lose his life because he has his passive, and that means that Power of Evil, along with Alphari and Hansama, can just continue the chase and slowly find more and more members. Misfits get the team fight win, but now they don't have a Baron that they can use to break into the base of Fnatic.
Right, and without a dragon up and available for them either, there's not a whole lot they can try and grab on this map. Only one tower outside of the base, of course, remains, and you could see in that team fight, Caps was doing quite a lot of work, even if it was Misfits that came up with all the kills.
Just very impressed with how Fnatic always find it. They always find that small punishment, that small mistake that they can just very quickly take advantage of. They did it so many times in their series versus G2, and it's also a big thing to note about how Misfits as a team, they do slow down a little bit around the mid-game. They're not the most proactive team. They are a little bit more reactive to what their opposition does, and while very often they do a good job of it, and they're able to make it work, sometimes it means that you slow down too much and it allows your opposition to find these ways to get back into the game.
And Fnatic know this quite well. I mean, this was an explicit statement, almost word for word, what Jess was saying in an interview very recently about the Misfits. He predicted that this would be the team that Fnatic would end up facing in the semifinals because he talked about how the reactiveness was actually going to be a strength against Unicorns of Love, who had a bit more reckless aggression, if you will. Speaking of reckless, with the rest of this team sitting in this mid lane, just trying to keep Misfits off the back, and perhaps this is the tempo advantage that Fnatic need, just trying to buy a little more time as they scale up themselves, of course. Items being completed. Reckless still hasn't finished up an Infinity Edge. Of course, he went a little bit more safe with the Quicksilver Sash.
Same for Han Sama. While he does have Desire and the ulti for a bit of self-peel, having that ability to break away from a Morgana Q or the Cassio ulti or the Ashe arrow, very valuable. Makes a lot of sense.
Yeah.
Power of Evil, though, he says, nah, I have a tanky front line. I want to be a wizard. So instead, he completes Rabadon's Death Gap. He's going to have a huge amount of burst damage. If Reckless gets anywhere near him, he will die. And he will not enjoy that experience. So you have to keep your eye. But it's also a very squishy build. If you get hit, ooh.
Yeah.
He does have the cleanse, though. You've got to remember that, too.
Hey, I mean, the best CC sometimes is death. Oh. So as flashing out and away from Max Lore's bounce. So Misfits still holding the line in the mid here, and Fnatic frustrated, unable to really break through this tower. While the mini wave's crashing up on the top side, Reckless is going to have to go deal with it, but look at Alfari. Down on the bottom, he's doing the same to push it along.
Another very common Fnatic move. They send their AD carry off into a side lane and funnel farm into him. This is going to allow Misfits to try and force a fight of their own. Good disengage there from Fnatic, not going to fall prey. They've used this strat multiple times in the past, and they know how to play around it.
You can see Misfits just hunting for an engage, relying on what Max Lore can get done, but you know, Fnatic, they've seen this one too many times. Wise to the tricks of this Misfits composition as they back away again and again and not let Misfits get anywhere near dumping all of their damage onto the face of any Fnatic member.
Now remember, in the full-on late game, when 4 items are being completed, I would argue that Fnatic have a pretty big edge in terms of their 5v5 composition. They have 2 really big tanks that have reliable or fairly reliable CC. You have a lot of consistent damage output from the Ashe and the Cassio, and overall, the composition is just much easier to play, especially when you throw a Morgana into the mix of things, who has the ultimate, provides additional CC, forces some members away. Whereas Misfits, they do have a fair amount of late game damage. Zyra is never a champion that you can afford to underestimate, but Power of Evil is the real swing point, because if he lands his damage onto the key targets, great, perfect. But if he's throwing his ulti into a tank, that's not ideal for the Misfit squad, because he only has 1 damage source. Once that ulti is gone, his damage output in fights is going to drop dramatically, but Cassio's will not, because as long as she has mana, she will be shredding through anyone that stands in her way, and that's going to be the really big determining factor, whether or not Power of Evil can land that crucial ultimate, and if he can kill those key targets.
But you can see Fnatic, just every chance they get, trying to at least catch him out and get him down. For the time being, he's been able to 2-step every Ashe arrow that's come his way. But if that changes, if Fnatic manage to find a big member or a big CC, shut him down, it's pretty easy for them to try and take this fight. Now Misfits throwing themselves out here to try and take down the Infernal Dragon, and you can see both top laners are away, teleports on both sides. Misfits have the damage to get this done. Fnatic, they're not keen on checking into this bunch of Misfits, so now they equalize on the Infernal Drakes.
Now Fnatic, they tried to get a bit of push on the middle lane, but that dragon went down so quickly that they instead were forced to back off. Now the Baron will be spawning in about a minute. You can already see some vision investment from the side of Misfits throughout the river. They took themselves the Scuttle Crab, but they want to start pushing in deeper, so they'll probably go back, restock their wards, get a few extra control wards as well, as we can already see a few of them have already been picked up. And that's when they'll start setting up around this major objective. And this will be the big point of contention for both these teams. Something that Misfits have done multiple times throughout the regular season is use Baron as a means to start fight. It is their most reliable way of making things happen. And sometimes it can end in disaster, while other times it can end in success. And often against the Unicorns of Love, they made it work perfectly, because Unicorns, well, they'll just fight you pretty much anywhere. Whereas Fnatic, I feel like they're a little bit more crafty in how they choose to fight you, as an arrow hits Power of Evil.
Oh, he can't dodge them all. At least he's got the cleanse this time around. Just for the chase, Max Lore, he's on his way out already, though. Scout of the Week, it's going to land on a few, but Misfits don't feel like they can take the counter engage. Meganar incoming.
Sars did use his ulti in that exchange to try and chunk out Maxlor. Now, I'd love to see Maxlor very quickly go back so he can regroup with his team and set up for the Baron once more, because main River Vision is in favor of Fnatic. They're just trying to get control over mid to force or poke out some of the Misfits members so they can rush down that Baron. We saw before how quickly they can do it, but they don't feel confident right now trying to get into a fight with this Misfit squad.
Alfari's looking to hunt down Broxer, though, and you can see that Maxlor's rejoined the team without backing a lot of that regeneration from his adaptive helm. Still, a lot of CC on this Fnatic side. Misfits getting a little antsy, going for the jump in. Look for Reckless flash away. That's going to be a key summoner down. Alfari's got his Gnar bar nearly completed, but he's stopped up by the Dark Binding. As he transforms, Fnatic give him a nice safe distance here. They don't want to take this fight just yet, unless they can get a pick off. Try to force out on the Baron.
And I can see and hear the players, Maxlor being so vocal on the side of Misfits, trying to lead the squad. We've seen Misfits falter a few times in their team fighting against the Unicorns of Love, and their team fighting is not their greatest strength when you compare that to Fnatic, who demonstrated immaculate coordination and really good engages in their series versus G2. You have to wonder who will be able to come out on top, because things are very tense right now. Both teams realize a big fight loss right now could give a big swing of momentum to either side.
And as you've said, this is where Fnatic have been tested time and again. Fighting from behind, a forte of theirs, something that we haven't yet seen from the Misfits team. But if there's ever a time to prove that you can do something you haven't shown before, in the semifinals of the playoffs, that's about as good as any.
Well, Fnatic definitely were often behind in their big series against G2, and they always found ways back, and now they're looking for it to do it again.
Ooh, nice scout of the week. Rupture's gonna land, but in comes two Misfits. The teleport coming in now for Alfari. Fnatic instantly backing away. Flashes, TPs, summoners burned a little bit here and there, and it continues to be an incredibly tense standoff in the mid.
Love the fact that two members of Misfits flashed into the way of the arrow to make sure that Power of Evil would not lose his life. They knew his cleanse was down and they were willing to make that sacrifice. The problem is, it cost two flashes on the side of Misfits. Now the sun does land onto Soaz.
All right. See if they can go a little farther in. It's Maxlor jumping forward, but he's not got backup just yet. He's chunked down to half his health bar. The rest of Fnatic, though, not trying to go any further than that.
Now Misfits, they need to just gain a bit of vision around the river and push out these sideways. Top is pushing against them. Bot, I believe, is pushing in the favor of Fnatic as well. They have to answer these waves before Fnatic can move up towards the Baron, and this will give Fnatic the window to just push down mid. They've been trying to get this tower for a very long time, but Misfits have just stood in their way.
They're right back at it again. I mean, it's insane to think 35 minutes in, Fnatic haven't been able to knock down this tower with how long they've been in this mid lane. But Fnatic, they may take their chances elsewhere, clearing out some vision outside the Baron pit. Both teams decide they've had enough of the ARAM for now.
A lot of tension in this game, Pirate. Considering the Misfits have a 5,000 gold lead, it certainly doesn't feel like it. Gonna very quickly look at the gold and see where a lot of that lies. And no surprise, the majority of it is sitting on top of Power of Evil, and as well on top of Alfari. Now Misfits, they're gonna go to the Baron. They're mainly looking for a fight here rather than to nuke it down.
See if they can do it. Broxy's already going around the side. Ash Arrow comes in. Misfits immediately trying to back away from this. Teleport has completed for Soaz. Misfits, they've gotten what they wanted out of this one. TP from Soaz down, and now Fnatic. Baron was not low enough for them to try and come in and finish the job. Everything resets, but Fnatic might have a chance to take this tower finally.
This was very important for Misfits because they knew that they did not have TP on their top laner, so they had to try and force it out from Soaz. They also got the Ash Arrow out from Reckless too, which means one of the big engage tools is unavailable for Fnatic. The Misfits, they're just continuing to buy time, but I don't think this is necessarily a good thing for them because remember we talked about the scaling. Fnatic's composition is going to scale very nicely. And even though Power of Evil, he is very far ahead of Caps in terms of gold, that's only really resulted in him being able to get a much earlier death cap. In terms of the items, they're still on about 3, and Caps, his damage output is not going to be low, even though he's 0-3 in this game.
Right. I mean, when you get to that late game stage, who would you rather have, a Syndra or a Cassiopeia? I think for the most part, most people would probably answer the latter. However, Misfits, they do have other sources of damage as Maxlor eats an Ash Arrow. Let's see if he can get out in time, dodges away from the Rupture. Elastic slingshot's over, but now it's Fnatic.
Okay, they're gonna rush it.
Start this one up. Let's see if they can get it down in time.
That's fast.
Already down to half the health. Maxlor would have to go the other route around because he's got the Elastic slingshot back up here. Can they take this fight? Fnatic, they peeled away from the Baron, kisses them right into it, and it looks like Misfits are gonna get this fight. Redemption's on both sides, but everyone's getting healed up, so for the time being, no one's gone down. Alphari has to crunch away. Everyone licking their wounds.
Oh my word, Pyra, everyone is still alive. Fnatic started off the Baron. They drew Misfits towards it. They thought they could rush it down, but a great ultimate from Maxwell drags both Broxah and Soaz out of the fight. But look, Soaz already full health thanks to the Warmugs. Alphari's a mini now.
Looking to flank here, but they've turned it on him here with Alphari and Hansama starting to chase him down. The Baron, not even sure what's going on with everybody inside the pit and around the back of it. Just gets a little bit angry. Ignar trying to look to set up a play.
Quick check on ultimates that are available. Reckless's arrow has just come back up. Caps' ulti is about to come back soon. Jez's is unavailable, Soaz unavailable, Broxah unavailable. Meanwhile on the other side, Power of Evil, his ulti just came back up. Same for Hansama, but Alphari, he's on his way. His Meganar's about to run out as Fnatic move back to the Baron.
Okay, it's down to half health once again. Can Misfits pull the fight? Alphari trying to distract while they look for the damage onto Caps. They've taken him down, and Reckless is going to fire back on the top laner on the opposite side, but will it be enough? Down goes Soaz. Hansama claims the kill. Reckless gonna get pulled back. He's got no flash. He's got a heal. Down it goes. Ignar flashes over, and they've got the damage for it. Power of Evil with the kill, and Broxah's on his own. Throws the party barrel out, but there is nowhere for him to go. Running back to the Misfits base, and that's not the direction you want to be.
And finally, people die. Pyra, Misfits come out with the greater fight. They're gonna make their way back to the Baron, and they're going to secure a solid lead over the former Kings of Europe, Fnatic, as Misfits take away the Baron.
Now, will this be enough for them to close out this game, Vedius? That is the question we have to ask. Against the Unicorns of Love 3 times in a row, the answer was yes, but this fight, it looked uneasy for a while.
Now, the big thing here is that Reckless, he went straight onto Alphari on the backline. So much damage just disappears because Maxwell gets a great engage onto Caps, and the Cassiopeia gets obliterated. Once he is gone, the only real threat left to worry about is Reckless, and Misfits say, we can expend our flashes to kill the AD carry and dismantle the Fnatic squad. Really good fight from Misfits, and Fnatic taking a big gamble. Starting off the Baron, it's always a risk being the ones to set it up. And because there were a lot of ultimates still unavailable, they were not able to turn it in their favor.
All right, so for the aftermath, now remember the reason Alphari wasn't with the team right away, he was sent top to try and deal with all that wave that was building. So as you can see, a little bit of damage done on the inhibitor all the same. But just after the Baron, Misfits make a beeline for Elder Drake, and they pick it up uncontested, so they have a huge 3 minutes to work with.
And while that whole Baron dance was going on, the tier 2 tower in the mid lane dropped for Fnatic as well. Misfits looking so good. 10,000 gold, the 9 kills in their favor. So many big items being completed. This risky build for Power of Evil really working out. We talked about how if he can get onto that key target, he will just blow them up. And we saw that snake being turned into boots in a matter of seconds.
Quite easily. And now with all the damage they have to bear, will it be enough to see them to the end of this game? A little bit of time to work with. If they can catch Reckless, there is the spell shield up and available, Black Shield I should say, and he's able to get away, but now with the enhanced minions and all of Misfits here on the mid lane, the exception of Alphari, busy up in the top side, they might just be able to crack open this base. They don't have a tower up in the top for themselves, but they're trying to make sure that neither does Fnatic. Featherstorm comes out to dodge at the explosive cask of Broxah, and Alphari leading a conga line of minions all the way down once again. Maxlor's silence stopped short for just a moment. Soaz trying to knock away all of these minions, and now it's back to the mid. Misfits go. On 2 fronts is the fight. Let's see if Alphari can be the difference maker. He hops and rolls in, but the base is broken open. 41 minutes. One decisive fight can be the game ender here as Misfits in the lead. Looking to crush down the former Kings of Europe.
Misfits very slowly moving between top and mid, eventually get down that mid lane inhibitor, and now they make their way back to top. A minute left on the Baron, roughly a similar sort of time for the Elder too. Actually waiting a little bit. They want that mid lane minion wave to get into position. They're just buying a little bit of time. They're being patient. They realize that bottom wave is stacking up too. Got to mention as well that Misfits, they did lose their inhibitor tower up in the top lane while all the Baron shenanigans were going on. So that could be a window for Fnatic if they can just find a good fight here. And it's something that they have to respect. That's a good arrow.
Looks like it went away quite fast, though, and all the same, a big fight for Misfits could finish this one right on their own terms. Tower going to be finished off pretty easily. In the blink of an eye, it goes down, and Soaz trying to survive, flashes away. Half his health's already gone. As Alphari goes in, Broxa stops him short with the belly bot, but now the inhibitor is under fire, and there's nothing Fnatic can do to stop this. 2 inhibitors swung, but will the fight go their way? Misfits, they've got to beat a hasty retreat out of here.
And all 5 members get out, but here comes the flanking TP.
Ignar, he might be the one caught up. No, he blows the Monsoon to push back Soaz. Misfits have some disengaged tools of their own, and you can see Fnatic trying to race for this one. Alphari even stops to back away. Redemption comes down for a little bit of damage. Now they turn on to Soaz if they have the bait. No, they just scatter the weak, continuing to run away. Look at those minions charging in the mid. Misfits are playing with Fnatic here.
And now Misfits, if they can just stop the back, they should even be able to get themselves a Nexus tower as they go on to Soaz.
Yeah, they can't fully commit, though. If they lose this fight, it may not matter, but look at those minions. Fnatic know they're panic pinging right now. They have to take this fight. They have to win it quick, but Misfits don't look to be going down. A big Gnar lands on 2. Maxlor goes bouncing. Redemption comes through.
Ooh,
massive Featherstorm for Hansama. 2 are down, just traded for Alphari, and those minions are still putting in overtime. Cap's trying to slither away, but you can't dodge out that bird. Hansama with the rampage.
Oh, Hansama so very nearly loses his life, but Caps is the one that ends up falling. Only Reckless and Jez is left alive. 2 inhibitors down, massive minion wave down in the bottom lane. Misfits have 4 members left alive, and Pyra, I think Misfits are going to take game 1.
It's certainly looking that way, Vedius. They have been as cautious as you can be against this favorite Fnatic squad, but now, with the waves crashing on multiple lanes, Reckless and Jez's have to watch as their towers turn to dust, and the upstarts, Misfits, upset Fnatic in game number 1.
Great performance from Misfits, continuing on from their success against the Unicorns of Love. And they did exactly what they did in the quarterfinal. They had a strong lane in mid and in top, but rather than invest into Alphari, they instead invested into Power of Evil. And oh boy, did that work out. 3-0 very early on into the game, rushing just so much damage, being that huge carry threat. And while for Misfits things slowed down, Fnatic, they got themselves a Baron. They were never truly able to turn that into something big enough to be game-changing. Misfits, after they dropped the Baron, they held back, they realized, okay, we need to be careful. They took their time, they were cautious, they were aware, and eventually they just continued to build the lead, bigger, slower. And eventually they got to a point where Fnatic, they just couldn't win the fights anymore. But I mean, it was so close around that Baron. That Baron, where Misfits won the fight and got it, really was the big decider.
Yeah, absolutely fantastic performance from Misfits. Now, they came out on top in an incredibly tense game number 1, so let's check in with our analysts for a closer look at that one.
Thank you very much, Pyra. And also joining us here is Europe's very own Amazing to assist in the analysis of this game 1. And, well, Misfits Gaming, they didn't miss a beat between their quarterfinal versus the Unicorns of Love and game 1, at least. And we had a lot of praise for Maxlor in that quarterfinals, and we were looking at him to make the difference here. And I believe that one of your main points at the start of the show was, we'll need to see Maxlor make a difference if Misfits want to win. And well, he definitely did. What exactly was so good in his game?
I mean, the early ganks from Maxwell, even when he was set a little bit behind from the early camps, was just super, super good. Aiming towards the mid lane, there's no cleanse on Caps. Once he actually gets engaged on, there's really no way to get out of it. And they coordinated like Syndra stunts with their Zac engages, super effective. So Caps couldn't even flash away the 2 times he died.
Yeah, like basically for him, the game plan was to get the top ahead, and he did a great job at it. Like, he always tried to find the openings onto mid lane, especially get Caps behind, like enabling power, even enabling roams on the map for them to actually like do something mid game, because that's where they have to strike.
Were you surprised at the fact that Broxa, who has been very impressive, amazing throughout the split, was kind of not there at the right times, that Maxlor was able to do so well in the early game?
I think, no, I wasn't entirely surprised. Like, he did kind of like some unselfish choice early game where he should have like abused Maxlor even harder and track him even more, where he could have gone for camps and instead went for ganks. So I wasn't quite surprised. Like, Maxlor really tried to pace himself and pace himself correctly, whereas Broxah didn't abuse at the right times.
Yeah, Fnatic had really interesting priorities with the advantage they got at the start of the game, the small jungle advantage, because also in terms of like warding, most of their wards were being placed just in the river. When you play against Zac, he doesn't care. He's not going to walk into the river and gank you from there. He literally jumps the walls every single time. And there were multiple situations where Broxah would invade into the jungle, actually could have placed a ward on the way out. They could have spotted the Zac, and that could probably have saved Caps at least once.
It could have, but Maxwell and Power of Evil did a fantastic job, and Fnatic found themselves at a deficit. Normally in a regular season, they find themselves about 1,000 gold up at 15 minutes. Now they were already in a deficit very early on, and we saw a couple of catch-up mechanics, right? They very early went for that inhibitor, and you guys had a discussion of, is that the right move or not? Because in the end, Misfits did get a lot in return as well.
Yeah, going for the lane swap that Fnatic pulled off, that was good. That was perfectly fine. We actually will get a fairly long replay now just kind of covering this because there's so many towers that went down. But this initial lane swap is good from Fnatic. They get first tower and they kind of break the game a little bit because right now they're just waiting for Zac to pull off another game.
Yeah, they definitely just want Source to scale. They want Mill Lane to scale and just basically in positions where they can actually succeed. So the break was pretty good. But then going for that and actually continuing to go for it, it's just the wrong choice because even if you take that inner turret, you get a gold lead out of it maybe, or get some gold out of it, but you lose so much pressure on the map and you will never go for that inner early on. So there's no point to it. The whole overextension just cost them so much on the map and allowed Misfits to actually gain control of the map even more so.
I also want people to look at the minimap and see Broxah right there. It's actually in a good position to kind of try and trap Power of Evil if he goes up top lane to defend. But once we roll the replay, you will see how Broxah on the minimap actually decides to leave after waiting for a few seconds, and that means he's no longer there for a potential fight or to try and prevent Syndra maybe roaming top. And in the end, they just have to flash away and run away, and now they've wasted so much time, so the bot lane of Misfits, they're already recalled and returned, so they can start pushing now. They can start pushing for more turrets and a Rift Herald, while Fnatic's bottom lane are really far behind in tempo, and this is where it went wrong for Fnatic. They were trading even first. When you greed for that inhib turret, oh, you set yourself behind so far. Reckless is not even at the tier 1 tower in the bottom lane. If you guys look at the minimap again, by the time Misfits are already hitting the tier 2 tower on top.
So if we look at further in the game, we saw that the fights got really close in the end, right? Do you think if they hadn't greeded for that inhibitor and kind of slowed the pace of the game down, they might have bought them a couple of more minutes to make the difference?
Yeah, definitely. If you just keep the gold lead within 2 to 3k, especially with the scaling comp that they have, where they just have to kite back and they can always start Ashes, they can always control the map. I think they could have easily won those team fights, but due to how the gold lead was basically in the end and how the game progressed, Misfits was actually able to fight fights that they shouldn't have been able to fight at certain times.
Well, we saw something that frustrated you, I think, Maurice, a lot in the mid-game, something we've seen from Misfits before. You said a lot, just go for Baron now, you're stronger, just go for Baron now, just do it. And it took a while for them to do it, but in the end, that's the way how they closed out the game. It could have been worse for them, because Fnatic got a Baron before that as well, but in the end, it turns out all right.
Yeah, definitely. What they just want to do, when you're in the lead and we're actually stronger and you actually can force people to come into you, you just want to start Asher. You have the abilities, you have the strength to do it. Obviously Maxwell had the delay on his armor build, so he lacked a bit of strength to actually start it, but they still had the ability to do it with the Janna shield and everything like that. So make the enemies come into you, force the fights that you want, and actually decide for them and not let the enemy decide what's going to happen on the map.
And this was a good fight from Misfits. That was so close, actually, just towards the start of the fight. Their stun from Power of Evil, he lands. The Black Shield from Jessis is half a second late. So Caps actually gets stunned up in one shot right away. If that Black Shield connects instantly, Caps doesn't get stunned, and Misfits' first engage is not them first solo killing the Cassiopeia. And that fight is way closer. Yeah, this Morgana build was awful. Absolutely disliked everything about Morgana here. Blind pick, not great. Allows you for picks like Janna and Lulu and whatever against it. The build didn't even have Ardent Sensor in it. There was Thunderlords and W in the lane to try and be more proactive in the early laning phase, where I just feel like that was a completely wrong approach to take. And a Black Shield like this one, it's hard in the second. It's a little ball you're looking at that flies in, so I don't fully want to blame Jessis for that. But if you do pick Morgana blind, you got to land those Black Shields on the carry right next to you, otherwise you lose a fight like this one.
Right, that's a big thing you don't want to see from Fnatic again, or differently. Is there something else? What do you want to see Misfits copying again in game 2? What pick do they have to get their hands on, and where do they have to put the pressure to win game 2?
I think Zach is actually a priority pick for them. Like, I think something gives them like the ability to control the map in the later stages of game, especially where you have to engage and you have to engage priority onto Fnatic is actually something that they need to have, because from my perspective, Misfits has always been a team that like kind of funnels like around mid to late game, doesn't know quite what to do. So them actually having to force engage and actually having to control the map on their own is something that I like to see from them. And Maxlor can definitely perform on that champion.
I also want to see Power Vivo once again on a champion that can set up ganks. Caps plays very aggressive in the laning phase and doesn't always get jungle help himself. I think you can continue to gank that lane if you have a good mid-jungle combo.
Well, Misfits, we'll see what they want to do. They are looking to pull off an upset against Fnatic. Find out if they can build on their lead when we return.